Hello, everyone. I'm Nina Gopal. Welcome to Global Express. This is where we give you an insight into events that impact India and its neighborhood. Hours after US President Donald Trump confirmed Marco Rubio as his Secretary of State, and within a day of his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States on January 20th, one of the first meetings that Marco Rubio had was a one to one with India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar and the Indian ambassador to Washington, Vikram Misri. Jaishankar had already declared India's presence at the inaugural as a signal that the Trump administration is prioritizing the US India relationship. While that in itself is extremely significant, the other key appointment that gladdened hearts, I think, in Delhi was that of Mike Waltz as the National Security Advisor. He was co chair of the India caucus. He's a strong advocate of better ties with India. He's even encouraged Democrats to be pro-India. In fact, both Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz have strong anti-China credentials. Rubio was clear that India should not even be sanctioned for its oil purchases from Russia. He's also urged high-level technology sharing. So, should we take this as a promising sign that the Trump administration wants to give primacy to the Washington Delhi connect that has steadily grown into a sort of a natural fit, so to speak? Is India being seen as a growing counter against China, a force to reckon with in the region, but facing a challenge nonetheless on the issues posed by Trump over illegal immigration, over trade, over tariffs? I mean, the fate of some 18,000 illegal Indians, undocumented Indian workers living illegally in the United States could still play a spoiler. And it was one of Trump's main election campaigns that struck home. Crackdown on illegal, undocumented workers, and immigrants, basically, does have the potential to wreck the American economy because it could lead to massive labor shortages and so on. Will it impact our ITBT sector? The other spoiler I want to, before I turn to my guests, is the new president telling business leaders at Davos in a televised address to the World Economic Forum that unless they made products in the US, they would face tariffs worth trillions of dollars. Now, just as he has threatened to do with Mexico, China, and Canada, these are moves that could spark, retaliatory measures, rising prices for consumers, disrupt global supply chains. And of course, Trump's wild comment about seizing the Panama Canal, which he said was run by China, and rename the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America is also, borderline trouble with a capital T. Talking to us today is Ambassador KP Fabian. He's served across the Middle East and in Europe, including Iran and Qatar, as well as in Europe, Italy, Austria, and Canada. He supervised and coordinated one of India's biggest rescue and repatriation missions of some 170,000 Indians displaced by the first Gulf War when Saddam Hussein Iraq army invaded Kuwait. Prolific writer, author, and commentator on world affairs. Welcome, Ambassador Fabian.
Thank you, Nina.
And with us is China expert Anushka Saxena. Ms. Saxena is a research analyst with Takshashila Institution's Indo-Pacific Studies Program. Her research focuses on China's People's Liberation Army, China-Taiwan relations, of course, India's foreign policy. She curates a weekly newsletter, Eye on China, a must-read for all China watchers. Welcome, Ms. Saxena.
Thank you, Ms. Gopal. Thank you so much.
My first question is to you, Ambassador. The fact is, Mr. Jaishankar, our foreign minister, did stand out at Trump's inauguration in the Capitol Rotunda. He had a front row seat in a crowd that had former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, not UK's current leader Keir Starmer, who was not invited, but Italian Prime Minister Giorgio Meloni, and again, not Chinese President Xi Jinping, who didn't attend despite an invitation. For India, then, everyone is marking it as a significant upgrade. So, what is the significance of this invitation? The significance of the Rubio Jaishankar meeting thereafter? Is it a signal that the Trump administration is according greater importance to India's ties with the US? I mean, it can't be dismissed as routine. It just simply wasn't routine.
Thank you. Well, the first thing to say about President Trump we can only predict that he is unpredictable.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that Xi Jinping was not there, but as we know, he was invited. In fact, was invited a long time ago. So, you know, President Trump believes in what is called deal making. So, what sort of deal making he has in his mind, we do not know.
He
But
is the ultimate
it
deal
is,
maker. You're right.
yeah, but it is clear that as regards relations with India, in his mind, these relations are important. So that is clear. And as you mentioned, the meetings that EAM, Dr. Jaishankar had in Washington, they are also important. And the Quad meeting, in fact, they wanted to have a Quad meeting immediately after the inauguration. That is why the Quad foreign ministers were invited.
So does
But
this signal a change from the previous Biden administration's handling of India, Anushka? Is it a continuation, or is India a little higher up in the pecking order in Trump's new world? I mean, what is your takeaway from the Jaishankar Rubio meet? I mean,
Right.
I call it the Jai Ho moment in India-US relations. Maybe I'm wrong, especially in the geopolitical context, because India and the US, I mean, the US has less than smooth relations with Beijing are a definite factor, I feel. And Ambassador Fabian, I'll come back to you on that same point.
Right. Thank you for that, Ms. Gopal. Well, I do think that EAM Jaishankar's front row seat and his description of the atmosphere that he experienced in Washington over these past few days as keen is, a great starting point to India-US relations under Trump's second presidency. But as much as these kind of tactical or narrative related messages spell signs of optimism after, as you rightly said, 4 years of tenuous India US relations under Joseph Biden. The fact of the matter remains that on policies where the Biden administration chose to be harsh with India, we're largely going to see a continuation under Trump. And where perhaps India had most problems with US trying to come and teach it lessons like ideas about how a democracy should be upheld or India's human rights record, so on and so forth. There, perhaps we might see an easing under Trump's second presidency, which will not necessarily translate into an easing of the relationship overall, because Trump's uh, aggravated economic stance is likely going to be the bone of contention that then derogates a lot of other things, and therefore this optimism will slowly recede, because we will see that Trump has continued a lot of Biden administration endeavors on investing in America, making in America, sanctioning countries that still continue to trade in oil with countries like Iran and Russia. And at the same time, under Trump, we'll see competing visions of economic growth between India and the US. So Trump wants to make America great again. India wants to be Atmanirbhar and to have American companies over to make in India. Under Biden, probably because of a bunch of diplomatic engagements, this wasn't played up as a problem. But under Trump, it's definitely going to be one.
So
Defense.
on that point, in fact, Ambassador Fabian, do you see trade as one of the biggest spoilers?
trade can be a matter for
I mean, the point
diplomat.
basically is, Ambassador Fabian, that both countries want a closer relationship. If you could tell us why that is so, what is the reasoning behind this move to come together?
Yes, but before that, let us try to understand Trump a little better.
Okay.
His first telephone call to a foreign leader was to the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia, correct?
Mm, mm,
Who promised to invest $600 billion over a period of 4 years. And later, somewhere, President Trump said it should be 1 trillion. Okay. So, investment and trade, these are matters that rate very high in Trump's approach.
yes.
Now, as regards trade with India, there is a certain deficit, or rather, India has a positive balance. But it's what is it, 30 or 32 billion dollars? It's peanuts. But you will remember that in his first term, Trump had got very difficult with India about some motorcycle.
Yes, that's true.
Yes, yes.
Harley
Now,
Davidson.
yeah, it was not a real issue, but he made so much hue and cry about it because that is his style. So my view is that on the one hand, it has been argued by pundits, both in India and in the United States, that if America wants to confront China, it badly needs India. That's a correct,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
statement. But as I said earlier, Trump is basically unpredictable. He's Don't rule out he's coming to an understanding with China. Don't rule it
Fine.
out.
That is a very good statement. You're basically saying that Washington and Beijing could come to an understanding.
Yes, in fact, if you remember, during his first presidency, uh, Mar-a-Lago, Trump was hosting Xi Jinping. And a little before the banquet started, Ivanka Trump got permission from China to sell her handbags and shoes and all that.
Wow.
You see? So it is sort of, and then as regards Trump, he conflates between what is good for Trump and what is good for America. So
Yeah,
it's
correct.
it's a complex picture, but nevertheless, when you look at it holistically, both India and America are going to have good relations. There may be a little hiccup here and there. For example, the Palin case, for example. Now, what will be Trump's attitude? My guess, it's only a guess, he will
Hmm.
milk it as much as possible. Not that he is very worried about it. And then Anushka said about human rights and minority rights under Biden. Well, basically, Biden administration was only sort of doing it for symbolic reasons. They didn't really mean it, and it didn't really affect Indo-US relations.
Hmm. So, but the United States under, Trump's second term, I mean, according to Rubio's statement, said that he would strengthen security and defense ties with India, and that he'd leverage the country's strategic importance in the Indo-Pacific. This is the exact words of that statement. And he also said that they would counter China's influence. So, how exactly will that pan out? Because I mean, as a manufacturing hub, I mean, China is integral in many ways to so many US companies. I mean, and India too has done something very clever. India has also opened the doors for Chinese and greater Chinese investment in the last couple of months. So, what does that signify, together with India's move towards arriving at some kind of a ceasefire along China's India's border? Uh, how exactly do you see this panning out, Anushka Saxena?
Right. So the India-US China dynamic is a very interesting one, and I'd really love to see how it pans out over the next 4 years. But just to offer some preliminary opinions on this, I think the first thing is to understand that the disengagement agreement that was reached in Depsang and Demchok regions in October of last year is very tactical in nature. So, yes, it's a breakthrough in the sense that India had the Depsang and Demchok issues on the table, to be discussed, for many across many core commander level talks in the past few years,
For
and the
five
Chinese.
months, apparently, for 5 months.
And the Chinese refused to budge on it, right? Even though it was in September 2022 when the conventional friction points disengagement happened on those, um, uh, in September 2022. Regardless of the breakthrough that this was, it's a tactical arrangement which is evident in the fact that, firstly, it was not without a quid pro quo. So India, so if we are to believe supposedly authentic reports from official anonymous official sources, India got whatever patrolling rights it needed in exchange for granting patrolling rights to China in the Yangtze region in Arunachal
That's
Pradesh.
right. That's right.
Right. So that's one thing. The second thing is that there is no easing on either side of vis-a-vis de-escalation or de-induction. And what you said about FDI as well, right? Yes, we can say that the approval rates have gone up slightly higher in the past couple of months, but the fact of the matter is the finance minister has told us just a few months ago that she's still going to keep an eye out on where money in India is coming from, and she's not going to take it lightly, right? So,
But I think
correlating.
I think the India's foreign policy is sort of now not going to block Chinese investment. I mean, she may say that, but I think the policy is sort of going towards a different direction, an easing of tension with China rather than trying to up the ante.
Right. See, I think blocking Chinese investments or banning them altogether is one thing, but to say that they will indefinitely be under they will be approved only through the government route, or through the approval route, is another thing altogether. Now that can extend beyond many years, right? The fact of the matter is Press Note 3 is still in play. China still is a land border country for us, and so if India really has to turn the twist on this and say that, we're still going to monitor this, according to a non-transparent ad hoc mechanism internally developed in the government, then there's no way improving business sentiment in India can do anything about it. So the fact of the matter is that, yes, the disengagement agreement has happened. Yes, Jay Shankar in his speech in the parliament did say that this allows us to focus on other areas of cooperation with China. But if the government wants to keep the screws tight, it can do so very well by restricting imports and investments. How this plays out in the India US China relationship is that, from the Chinese perspective, its contestation with the US has tinted its lens of viewing the world. So it will even view the India US relationship, advancements in that relationship, from the lens of its competition with the US. So naturally, if India and US come together closer, or say sign the ISET or a jet engine co-production deal, it's basically, from the Chinese perspective, something that should sound an alarm. So,
Hmm.
the only way for each of these three countries to coexist, survive, and enhance their partnerships, is for them to de-link their bilateral relationships with the other. So the US should
That's
not think about
important.
what the India-China relationship is like, but at the same time, the US should acknowledge that there is a problem there, and there is some benefit to be extracted from there. In that sense, I also think India-US relationship is bound to become more transactional, because both India and the US see a challenge in China, economically, militarily, and technologically. And so, while we can ask China to decouple its view of India and the US from its own relationship with the two, we cannot say the same for India and the US, because they have to come together, and China is a very important mutual angle here that
Actually,
can unfold.
that's the point that I want to come back to you, Mr. Ambassador Fabian. That is very important. The fact is that in the India-US coupling is basically aimed at China. I mean, right from the very beginning.
That's correct, but we also have to understand India's own approach.
Hmm.
India doesn't want to have a military alliance with the United States against China.
Is that a fact? Because I believe that there is. It's not an alliance per se, but the fact that the U.S. is backing India on joint defense, production on in many areas is a factor now. It's a reality today.
Yes, but let us again try to understand that. President
Hmm.
Trump is the most enthusiastic salesperson for the military industrial complex.
Okay.
And you might recall a photograph of him with the Saudi crown prince showing all sorts of weapons which the Saudis were going to order.
Yeah.
Okay. So when Marco Rubio said about defense and strategic cooperation, a good part of it is India is buying weapons. And when we buy weapons, it will be necessary to give us technology also. And it is
Hmm.
quite likely that a Trump administration will be a little more lenient in parting with technology than the Biden administration has been. You might recall what is trying to be done with the GE, General Electric.
Hmm.
They will give us 90% of technology. But what they are not giving, the 10% can be most crucial, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
that is one aspect of it. Second is Trump uh, is there's a good point about him that he doesn't like wars.
Mm.
He is a business person. He doesn't like wars. So he also will not carry on with a policy on China, which will sort of take it to a military confrontation. And again, just to do a thought experiment, I don't expect it, but should there be another military confrontation between India and China, what will the US do? It might supply us with weapons, but
Mm.
no question of any boots on the ground. Absolutely no.
That's right. That's right. That's
So
that's
there
that's
are
what
limits.
happened
There
last
are
time
limits.
also.
There are limits, and it is important for India to understand these limits.
Yeah. No, I mean, there is definitely a big difference between Trump in his first tenure and today. I mean, this is a much wiser Trump, if we can even call him that, because but we have to give him credit to a certain extent because he is the one who initiated this 2+2 meetings of the foreign and defense ministers of both India and the US. I mean, and technology sharing was given an upgrade. I mean, there was a strategic trade authorization at the very top level, which said there would be technology sharing. So, I mean, 2.0, Trump 2.0 could see that happening as well, But whether it will be in now that Elon Musk has become such a big factor, will it go to into space technology? Will it be defense? That would be interesting to see. I mean, would either of you like to comment on that?
Anushka first.
Yeah, Anushka, let's hear from you.
Sure. So, yeah, just wanted to make a point on defense and security cooperation, right?
Yeah.
And Ambassador Fabian put this excellently, but just to kind of give an example, Sir said that Trump is the front runner for the U.S. military industrial complexes business, right? And
Mhm.
um, and I think that's going to be the case across sectors. Trump is going to be the most proactive salesman for everything American, right? And while that may be good for India in some ways, maybe perhaps translating even into Trump giving away some crucial technology to India, the fact of the matter is also that India is also a defense competitor for the US. 50% of India's exports to the US are weapons and defense equipment. And if we just look at, say, jets, for example, soon India's Tejas is going to be competing with the US's F-16. And we know that in October last year, US Congress has approved sale of F-16s to Argentina and even to Turkey in the past 1 or 2 years, if I'm not wrong, right? So imagine there is a deal for jet engine co-production, the GE 404 with India. It's not yet come around to fruition because we don't have that technology. When we receive it, Tejas will be cheaper, lighter in the foreign market, but at the same time, the US's F-16s will still be competing with Tejas. Quite an
That's
interesting
that that's very interesting.
dilemma, right? And same thing will apply to oil. For example, the US
Mhm.
will want so Trump came in and said drill baby drill, right? So he's going to
Yeah,
have companies really leverage that liquid gold, as he said at Davos, right? He called petroleum liquid gold. He's going to have companies leverage it, and then where is he going to want to sell it? In the EU, right? And even there, India is a competitor because India never reduced its reliance on Russian oil. What it did was it instead started rerouting it to the
that's
EU, and
true.
it's
So it
it's
basically bought Russian oil and it's sending it back, into
yeah,
Europe.
yeah, processing and sending it back, right? And that has led India to see a huge rise in trade with countries like Romania. So as much as there is a vibrant potential for a burgeoning security and technological cooperation here, it must also take into consideration a fact then that it also creates sources of friction or competition for India and the US under a precedent that emphasizes this economic centrality of India, of America, more than anything else.
What about this critical and emerging technologies that Rubio brought up? What exactly does that mean, Anushka? What kind of synergy is there between America and the US on this?
Right. So I think ISET is uh, definitely a pioneering project that I can safely say Trump is not going to take off the table anytime soon because it's just too high profile, and it enables way too many opportunities for Indian academic and technological institutions to cooperate with their counterparts in the US. Now there is real R&D potential here, but the fact of the matter is on critical exchanges of know-how or equipment, there's zilch. That might also be the case because the initiative is fairly new and it's mostly focused now on how to standardize and synchronize processes, research, thinking, so on and so forth. But and this is a very interesting case study from just recently. The US came out under Biden administration with the AI diffusion regulations just last month, right, in December 24. And as per the regulations, India is a tier 2 country for US to cooperate with in the field of AI diffusion. And what being a tier 2 country means is that you're not really a strong US ally. You're not really a partner that can bring US successes in AI diffusion, and you're not really a country that the US just can't live without if it has to integrate supply chains or enhance supply chains vis-a-vis AI. So India is a tier 2 country, which means India is not going to get any of the GPUs that make AI computing possible indigenously. And if investments are going to come in from the US, it's going to be an American firm establishing its own production center in India with
Yeah.
little cooperation possibility with the local actor. So I guess that's the situation now. And again, if we view it from the kind of lens Trump will deploy for America, it's going to be competitive. It's going to be make America great again. And that's where, initiatives like ISET will become broad, overarching platforms for deliberation as opposed to very real hardcore.
That's very interesting. Ambassador, if I could come back to you on this Rubio's decision, to work to advance economic ties with India. I mean, it is a signal in many ways, even though people may discount it or not discount it. The fact is, his first meeting as Secretary of State was to meet his Indian counterpart, and as we've discussed, I mean, it wasn't Canada, it wasn't Mexico, it wasn't any of the NATO allies. So what does that shouldn't that also be important for us? Because I mean, that Quad meeting, India has actually on Quad, for example, India has actually dragged its foot. I mean, it hasn't really played the kind of role that the US would like it to have played in Quad, in many ways. I mean, this free and open India Pacific in Indo-Pacific. I mean, we stand to lose if we strongly oppose, as the statement says, China's position of, seeking to change the status quo. Can we even afford to, sort of stand up to China, you know, on its claim over, the over sovereignty over Taiwan? So my basic question is, where do we stand in this India, China, US dynamic?
Good. Now, as regards the Indo-Pacific, it is important that the court should say that they will not uh, permit any sort of use of force to change the status quo. But let's also understand one thing. China has in the past changed the status quo. It has violated UNCLOS, United Nations Law and Convention on the Law of the Seas. It has transformed water into land, water bodies into
Yes.
land, and then claimed, more maritime rights. Now, nothing of that is going to be reversed. Let us be quite clear about it. Only thing is that further action by China in that direction, suppose it affects the Philippines.
Yes.
Now, my question is, I don't have the answer. Suppose there is a real military confrontation between the Philippines and PRC. What will America do? And what will India do? India is certainly not going to send military support to the Philippines. That's very clear. You see, that's point number one. Point number two is that Anushka correctly said, that they want to sell more defense items and oil, which, the liquid gold, which Trump wants to unearth, dig out.
Mm.
Good. Let's also understand one thing. Sooner or later, and I believe sooner rather than later, the Ukraine war is going to come to an end.
Why do you say that, Ambassador?
Because, in the Western media say, oh, what can bring Putin to the negotiating table? Well, he's ready to come to the negotiating table. If you recall, the war started in 24th of February 2022.
Mm-hmm.
March and April, negotiations were held first in Belarus and later in Istanbul. And an agreement was arrived at. Then a phone call came from Boris Johnson, UK Prime Minister, who would have acted, what shall I say, in conjunction with Washington. And that agreement was shelved and the war got carried on. Even now, Putin has said that he is prepared to talk on for a ceasefire, provided the ground realities are recognized. And even if Trump were to pump in more weapons into
Which he's
Ukraine,
not
which is
going to do.
most unlikely, even then, my view is that Russia's local military superiority holds. And as I said, Trump claims to be a peacemaker. He has
Mm.
repeatedly said that. Whether that will be to the benefit of the Palestinians is a different matter. But
Mm.
as regards Ukraine, as regards the war in Europe, Trump is not likely to send any further assistance to Ukraine. And
Yeah.
if he gives a hint that further assistance is off the table, then Zelensky will have to agree to talks.
Mm.
So once these talks take place, Russia will insist and will get away with it. The sanctions on Russia will have to be lifted. Otherwise, there is no ceasefire. So, if that
That's the
is the
real
case,
possibility.
if that is the case, India will continue to buy slightly cheaper Russian oil rather
Yeah,
than the expensive American oil.
correct.
You know, actually, it's a political decision to buy oil from America. It is cheaper to buy it from Saudi Arabia. Look at the transportation cost. You see,
Yeah,
so
that's true. That's true, Ambassador. I agree with you. Yeah, we should
so
go back to our old Gulf friends. Yeah.
so
So
let us see.
are there other China hawks in the Trump administration? I mean, apart from Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz, I mean, how much is there an anti-China kind of feel to the Trump administration, Ambassador?
Well, let me put it this way: there is a bipartisan consensus in the United States that China is the only rival the United States has to deal with, and that it has to be addressed, the Chinese challenge. And as you know, European Union also has been, America has been trying to take them also to take that line. But you know that UK's Prime Minister, where did he go recently? He went to China. Did he?
He did, yes.
Yeah. In other words, China cannot be wished away. Europe will not be able to, you know, uh, retain a policy of reducing significantly the economic deals with China. And if America alone is sort of challenging China, well, China, as we already know, it goes through other markets, you
Hmm.
know. So it is not easy to take on China in the way America has been trying to.
Hmm.
China's rise cannot be stopped. It can be decelerated, but it cannot be stopped.
That's a good point, but China's economy is also in a free fall, Anushka Sharma. I mean, and countering China at this stage would be easier for Trump than it would be at any other time, right? I mean, it is, and I'm certain that just as there is an equation between Modi and Trump, I'm sure that Trump will also try to create some kind of relationship with Xi Jinping, or it's particularly if China's investments in America are the carrot that are being held out.
Right. No, I definitely think that Trump's going to try and cultivate a personal relationship with Xi Jinping. And it's not just the precedent or from Trump 1.0, as it were, that kind of indicates that. It's also the fact that he personally invited President Xi Jinping to attend the inauguration. And also, he has folks in his intended cabinet that want to have at least a positive kind of approach to trading with China. And the top name on there is Elon Musk, right? The
That's
Chinese
right.
love Elon Musk, and geoeconomics today is it's in a situation where it's literally sometimes a competition between the government and private sector entities, right? Governments such as maybe the Biden administration would want companies like Intel to simply move out of China and re-establish production capabilities in America, right? And then, but Intel is the profit maker, the power producer. So what's it then going to do? So it's in situations like this, regulation largely always comes out on top. But with Trump and people like Elon Musk on board, and Mark Zuckerberg and other
Yeah, he's
entrepreneurs
got he's got a whole load of them. Yes.
attending
And
the inauguration.
apparently, at the swearing in at the rotunda, one of the people sitting in the audience was the TikTok's, the
Oh, Suzy.
Chinese-owned app's chief executive, Xu Chu. So,
Yeah.
he was sitting right next to Trump's pick for the intelligence chief, Tulsi Gabbard. So, I mean, you
Correct.
have ex-mogul Elon Musk, you have Amazon boss Jeff Bezos, and now you have Meta chief Mark Zuckerberg. So yes, it is all about the deal making, and so you actually think that this is going to impact the US-China relationship?
I mean, I do think the way things are going right now, of course, it's very early days, but it does seem like uh, there will be a two-pronged strategy for economic engagement with China, with Trump on the in the presidency, right? The first prong of this will be, of course, high tariffs, protecting markets from cheap incessant Chinese imports, so on and so forth. So I'm absolutely sure that's not going to go anywhere, because there still has to be an emphasis and appealing to the masses domestically on making in America and using in America and buying from America, so on and so forth. So, like Biden said, right, the hull of the carrier to the guardrails of a bridge, that and the steel that is used in that, all of that should be American. So I'm sure Trump is only going to amplify that. But the second strong prong of the economic engagement with China is going to be to let businesses thrive. Now, China
Mm.
may have intense economic problems, and some of them may pertain to overcapacity. Obviously, Trump isn't going to touch any of those. But Trump is going to potentially try and not only reduce America's deficit with China, but also help firms thriving in China to survive there and to do well, right? So, if tomorrow, the world poses both Elon Musk and Trump a question, would you rather maintain your security prerogatives vis-a-vis Tesla operating in China, or would you rather that Tesla produce cheap EVs and then sell it to the world? Both of them are probably going to agree that the choice is going to be the latter. So I think that's a very interesting, ironic dynamic that's going to be playing out. But yes, I do think, given as Ambassador Fabian said, his deal making approach to things, it's going to be likely that at least on the
It will be
investment,
business over geopolitics.
that's going to, and business and reducing trade deficits. So it could then also mean that US would try to sell more things to the Chinese, and that could have its own benefits for the trade relationship as well.
So, Ambassador Fabian, the Trump's inauguration was one of the most incredible chest thumping of presidential power in recent times. I mean, he not only claimed he'd have a golden age, he said America's decline is over, he said America's going to be greater, stronger, far more exceptional than before. He said we'll be the envy of every nation. We will not be allowed to allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. Was it just bombast, or can he actually make that happen? Because I mean, he went to the residue desk straight after and assigned this flurry of executive orders, as you've all talked about, from the ceasefire in the Middle East, which is just plain, I mean, it's brought the poor Israeli hostages home, some of them, but it's also, opened the doors to the West Bank being sort of destroyed by the Israelis. And you have the pardon of his supporters. You have the scrapping of the Paris Agreement on climate change, which I think is pretty disastrous. He stepped out of the WHO. So, I mean, what is this top 10 priorities, do you think, uh, in the coming months?
Well, let me put it this way. First point I want to make is that Trump violated norms when, with Biden sitting there, he said this is a corrupt administration. Now, that is not done. But then Trump is Trump. He is not bound by any norms. And even
Right.
geopolitics. No, he has no geopolitical vision. He has only a geo-economic vision.
Mm.
You know, he
Yeah, so
doesn't
it's
believe,
geoeconomics over geopolitics.
yeah, and in the geo-economic, he believes, I believe wrongly, but he believes that it's a solar system. America has the sun, and the other countries, the planets revolving around America,
Mm.
and that he can intervene. He can change the gravity, you know. So that is his approach. Now, you asked me about bombast. Well, there is considerable bombast, as we know, but at the same time, there is a method in his madness.
Hmm.
And only thing is that, he has been speaking about tariff, the most beautiful word in the dictionary. What we have to look for is if he raises tariffs against, say, China, China will certainly raise tariffs against America.
So it's a
Canada
tug of
has said
war.
that Canada has said that it will. Trump's expectation that he threatens and they will come, let us have a conversation, that may or may not be fulfilled because these leaders also have to think of their domestic audience. And if there is a trade war, it will not make America great again because the American consumer will have to pay more. Inflation will shoot up. And one more point, I want to illustrate confused thinking on the part of Trump. He
Hmm.
speaks of establishing an external revenue service.
Yes.
Internal revenue service is income tax and all that. External revenue, whereby raising tariff, money will come into America's treasury. Okay, now my question is it really external? Because if, Nina, you are an exporter from China and I am an importer in California, and if the tariff is raised, who pays the increased tariff? I pay it, importer. It may be that you may reduce your price because of the rise in tariff, but you may not take care of it entirely. But in any case, it is internal. The
Yeah, I get that.
revenue is internal. Now listen, when you don't think through, then you tend to use words loosely. So there's a lot of loose thinking. Let's see.
So all this loose talk is quite, worrying. Shouldn't it worry India as well? Because we are an ITBT tech hub. I mean, we have a boom town in Bangalore and Hyderabad and parts of Bombay. I mean, this is India's, Silicon Valley. Will it get affected by Trump's, diatribe against illegal immigration? I mean, could it go for a toss? Because I mean, illegal immigration was one of, the linchpins of Trump's election campaign, not just this year or this week, but for years now, since he lost the last re-election. So can India trust? I mean, even at the day of his inauguration, he actually said it's a national emergency. So can India actually trust Trump to do the right thing on the immigration? Because Jaishankar brought it up as well after his meeting with Rubio, Anushka.
Right.
Well, okay.
Sorry. So I
Ambassador, you
think,
want to come in?
yeah.
It's okay after Anushka.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. So, I think the two most important executive orders from this immigration and Indians in the US perspective is, of course, one is on curbing illegal immigration and cracking down on it, and the other is not allowing for birth to be given, for birth to be
That's
the
right.
reason an individual will have a right to be a US citizen, right? So, childbirth as a right to nationality is also going to be evoked, and will come into implementation in the next 1 month, provided courts do not stall its execution, right? So, uh, and you mentioned that number 18,000. So yes, that is indeed the number of Indians that are on the verge of being deported, and that might just be the case in the next 30 days. And from the American perspective, this it also seems to be a very, very important priority, because even in a Rubio's meeting with EA and Jaishankar, he says that there is a need to discuss illegal immigration and a need to secure India's cooperation on that issue in a very serious manner. Now, India's transcript of that meeting doesn't say anything about immigration, let alone illegal. So, obviously, it's a very sour issue for India. H-1B visas were a cause of concern even before Trump came to power. And when he did come to power and immediately he signed those executive orders, it was a much bigger concern. But I think some of us can find solace in the fact that just recently he also said something like, I'm not going to ban talent coming in completely because I need smart people. So
Hmm.
I guess the real test of Indian diplomacy and India-US relations here is going to be how to cooperate silently with US's crackdown on illegal immigration, while at the same time ensuring that those that really make a difference, or those who want to make a living in the US and contribute to American economy, don't really get impacted or sidelined by initiatives like this. How that's going to play out is a quandary at the moment. But I think India's approach should be this: to not necessarily fight on uh, illegal immigration, because you only have so many cards to play with an eccentric president, but to really see how mutual growth and export of talent from India is possible, uh, even as such initiatives keep on continuing to play.
Yeah, that's
And
very well put, actually. Yeah.
yeah,
Because I
just
mean, this is. Yeah, tell me.
no, it's just one point on something that you just mentioned before this, which was about the golden age, right? Trump talked about it, and you asked if he can really make it possible. Can I just say that the fact of the matter is, US's biggest strength is its alliances. And if we just look at a simple example of semiconductor denial to China, right? So Trump wants both to have very transactional alliances where he doesn't have to really do anything unless these partners pay the US some money to insure it. But at the same time, he also wants to rally these countries against China on certain aspects, right? So let's assume semiconductor denial is the case in hand, and the US wants Japan and the Netherlands to stop exporting critical components, lithography tools, etc., to China, to deny it progress in semiconductor manufacturing. Now, you can't do that. You can't leverage your alliances if you want to keep on undermining them. So if tomorrow the Philippines wants to invoke the mutual defense treaty because China keeps enhancing the threshold of aggression in the South China Sea,
That's
and
true. In the Spratlys and the Paracel Islands. Yep.
yeah, and Trump says, you haven't done enough, you haven't kicked in enough for us to comply to the MDT. It's going to be a big deal, and so the golden age is not going to be possible if alliances are not maintained. And I think Trump is already against American exceptionalism, but the fact of the matter is, the reason why America is where it is because it had these
Oh,
alliances and partnerships to toe its line on a bunch of issues. And I think that's where the golden age is really on a make or break uh, mountain. So yeah.
very interesting. Very interesting aspect. If I can come back to you, Ambassador Payman, I mean, Elon Musk is the one who does favor skilled immigration, but there is a Steve Bannon who opposes all immigration. So, if you could just weigh in on that, on whether immigration is going to be the one that India is
Yes.
going to have to skirt around, as
Yeah.
Anushka says.
Yeah. But just one point. Golden age is a slogan. It is not a policy.
Mhm.
Now, coming to immigration, it is true that the American version highlighted that point. Now, as Anushka pointed out correctly, 18,000 Indians who illegally entered the United States are due for deportation very soon. But the actual figure of Indians in the United States having entered illegally there is 720,000,
Mm.
third largest. Okay. Now, India cannot and does not promote illegal immigration into any other country. Obviously, government cannot control everything, but
Yeah,
India doesn't
Punjab,
support
Punjab
India.
is a leaky boat,
Yes,
Ambassador.
but India doesn't support. India doesn't promote.
That's true.
Okay, and on that, obviously, America will proceed with its policy, and we should not take it as a bilateral matter. Let me put it this way: if these 18,000 are sent back to India, so what? After all, they are coming back to their own country, you know. So that is not a big issue for us. Now, as regards our youngsters, who are competent in IT and elsewhere, getting H-1B visa, well, the present indications are that after Elon Musk's intervention, Trump also has said that we need talents. So I don't think there will be much of a problem. Another thing is that if Trump makes it so difficult for American companies to import Indian talent, then those companies might migrate to Bangalore or Cyberabad.
Mm.
You see, so it's a complex thing. It is Trump is not the only actor; he is only one among the many actors.
That's a good point.
But he
Yeah.
might believe that he is the prime actor, but he may not
Yeah.
be entirely right.
Mm. That's very interesting. But I mean, this Trump and Modi do have a unique dynamic. I mean, Trump, they're saying, could even visit India in the next, 100 days. But I'm curious about China, Anushka. I mean, is there a move that, I mean, look at it from China's point of view. Is there a move by China to, you know, move to woo Trump? Is there a move by Xi Jinping to act on the U.S. before anything is done? Does he have any sort of weapons up his sleeve, to counter India, the Modi, Trump dynamic?
Right. So, usually in the past 3 years, we've seen that February, March is the period where a bunch of high level American officials travel to China to engage with their counterparts. So, in the last 2 years, we saw Blinken, Lloyd Austin meet with Wang Yi and others, Gina Raimondo as well. So, and February, March has been the period for that, save for that one time when Blinken's visit was postponed because of the spy balloon incident, right? So it is likely that such meetings will again come up on the rosters of these officials. We have I think this guy called Besset as the intended secretary of defense, and the CEO of a firm as
Excellent.
an
No, but
yeah.
but the point is that Marco Rubio's first visit abroad to any country is going to be Panama. It's not China, which is quite interesting, don't you think? After the clangor about the about Panama in the first place.
Yeah, I think the fact that Trump said that he could take control of this, and then
No,
the
because he specifically said that the Panama Canal is controlled by
yeah,
China.
yeah, he said that Panama Canal is controlled by China. He'd like to take it back. And it belonged to China, but it will belong to the US now, or something like that. And then that prompted, I think, President Molino of Panama to say that it always belonged to Panama and it's not a
That's right.
concession of the US, right?
No,
So
I mean that aside. I mean the fact is, does Xi Jinping have a plan up his sleeve? And
yeah,
I'm sorry, but we're running out of time, so please
Hmm.
wrap up.
Yeah,
I really don't think so. There's a plan as such, but I'd say from firstly the visit, Rubio's visit to Panama would rather be like a you know diplomatic maneuver to kind of keep things under control. But the larger thing is that making a visit to China would send a much different signal than perhaps Trump or
Hmm.
some of the folks in his cabinet would want to send. And yeah, the team might soon come to India for the Quad summit, but again, not viewing Quad from the traditional lens of security, kind of detaching it from a challenger to China. That perspective would help us think more of the outcomes Quad can achieve otherwise. And I don't really think Xi Jinping has a plan up his sleeve. A lot of the strategic thinking that we accredit to China doesn't necessarily pan out that way. It could just be that Xi Jinping is going to take it slow. He's tried some maneuvers before. He's tried the disengagement with India. He's tried not picking up the military to military call when Lloyd Austin called him a couple months ago, just to set the narrative that, oh, we're in charge here. But now that Trump's actually in power, it's very hard to say if Xi Jinping is going to go all in vis-a-vis military deterrence, especially given that Trump has expressed support for arms sales to Taiwan, or if he's going to play it slow and try and see if diplomacy works.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Fabian, concluding remarks?
But,
I said, Ambassador Fabian, concluding remarks?
well, let me put it this way: the world is more complex than President Donald Trump has imagined. There are various forces, and essentially, foreign relations are foreign relations. In other words, the relations between A and B are not entirely determined by A. They are determined by both A and B and also by C, D, E, F, and all that. You see? So it's a complex chessboard. And if anyone thinks that, he or she can make moves which will determine the game, well, think again.
That's very well put. So we don't know who's going to move the pawns on this very intricate chessboard, and we still don't know what Trump's clear thinking is on how to handle China and India, the China-India dynamic, and the fact that rising China is really a threat to the US. Thank you very much, Ambassador Fabian. Thank you, Anushka Saxena, for coming on the show. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Do click on the new Indian Express website and Global Express. Thank you.